Hello everyone, it's Eclectic Kelpie, and this is Adult Colored Glasses, the show where I rewatch media from my childhood satirically and sincerely. And today, we are going to be watching one of, I think, the best cartoons of all time. I'm sure a lot of people agree with that statement. Avatar The Last Airbender. I have so much nostalgia for this show, but also so much love for it now as an adult because genuinely I think it really holds up. Like, of course, not everything is going to be perfect. It is still a product of the early 2000s. There's some silliness in it as a kid's show that doesn't translate now to me being an adult enjoying watching it. But yeah, overall, I think that the themes, the animation, the characters, the development of the characters, the depictions of living through horrible circumstances, but also finding joy within that to have catharsis and healing and you know, art and creation are the best rebellion in war times. So yeah, I'm really excited. I love Avatar The Last Airbender. I haven't watched it in quite a number of years now, but I have rewatched it in my adult life because, of course, it is fantastic. So I'm very excited to watch the first episode again today. I already know that this is going to be good. I'm not sure how the first episode is going to be. I know that I love Avatar as a whole complete series, but just watching only the first episode and then leaving it at that, I feel like we'll see how it goes. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into Avatar The Last Airbender, episode 1, Boy in the Iceberg. I didn't even have to... That's so fun. I remembered what it was called without looking at the episode name. I'm pretty proud of myself. Okay, I think, like, I talk a lot about the, like, opening sequences in these nostalgia rewatches, and obviously Avatar The Last Airbender doesn't have a lot of, like, well, it does have the, like, musical score at the end right before the episode starts when it does the, like, title sequence, but having it be, like, narrated at the beginning, I think is just so iconic, and it's so good, and it really maximalizes the watching potential for people because, you know, obviously everyone should watch it as a continuous series, but perhaps not everybody has that accessibility, especially when this was, like, first coming out, and I did watch it when it was first coming out. I don't want to know how old that... I don't want to think about that. But I was watching it when it first came out. So having this such a deeply rich, lore motivated show, you have to have this introduction. So I think that they do such a fantastic job at having this sequence play where obviously at the beginning of this episode, the first episode has an extended version of that lore explanation of kind of setting up the world, what's going on, what to expect, the world state that they're in with, like, the Fire Nation attacking everyone else. But having that is so necessary for people who are just dropping in when episodes were coming out. I think that kind of illustrates a product of its time a little bit because you couldn't just go on to, like, a streaming service and watch all the episodes at once or catch up on an episode randomly. Like, you had to be at the right place at the right time with the right channel on your TV, and I certainly did not watch every episode in its entirety from start to finish with the entire series until I had access to, like, online streaming. So certainly certainly with such a very deeply rich show, they had to have some sort of background information for people to just drop in or to get people interested in the show and to stick with it with a proper storytelling structure. Because you can't really drop into Avatar The Last Airbender without any information. It's going to be very challenging to do so, and it's not going to be the most fully fleshed out experience for your viewing pleasure. So I think that it's super fun that they do this narration. I think it really works. But I also think it's a fun little time capsule of, like, the need for it within what we just talked about, like, you can't just, like, jump into an episode anywhere and, like, find all of these episodes anywhere, because you couldn't, which is crazy. whoa, actually, it just kind of like hit for anything. Any introduction to, oh my god, that's why they had intros. That's why people did intros, was to tell you what the what the show was about so that you could get into it and understand it. And I feel like show introductions, at least in this kind of way, because I mean, obviously there's still show introductions, but like with lyrics that had like what the show was about and all of these things, that's just like barely a thing anymore. Like if you want, for example, like Bridgerton, I'm excited for the new season of Bridgerton, so that's what like the first thing that popped into my head was it's literally just like a tree that grows and it's like a musical score, and that's the intro to Bridgerton, which has like nothing to do with anything, and it doesn't like articulate something to like a casual viewer who's popping in for the first time. Like it's not gonna tell them what the show is about. But also people skip intros. I skip intros, so it totally makes sense. Like, why would developers put time and energy and effort into something that people aren't even gonna watch and they're gonna skip? Because now we can do that. That processing is exactly why I love doing this rewatch series, because it's just so enlightening to things that like I wouldn't have thought about without being prompted. And the prompt is watching these old shows and watching like my childhood media and reminiscing on the world at that time, and also just enjoying the nostalgia. So like, wow. Anyways, let's continue. We're only on the second bender in the story so far of the intro. It's also so interesting, actually. Really quick. I know that we're like, we're like not even anywhere into the show yet, but just like really quick. Going back, I think it's really interesting. So like here we have Master Paku. I don't think I actually know who that guy is. Azula. And then Aang. I think it's really fun and interesting why the animators chose those individuals to represent their nations, which is really interesting. Obviously, Aang is the last airbender. That's the whole premise, and that's the whole point. So that's why he's the only airbender available to be like the master of that particular bending style. But I think it's so interesting that they chose Azula to be like the representation of the master of fire. Obviously she is. She's fantastic. She does blue flames. Like, she's so cool. Clearly I'm a firebender admirer. And then obviously Master Paku is who trains Katara, and how Katara gets to be a waterbending master. So he's like a good representation. But I think it's so interesting. It kind of looks like Loki, like the boulder, but it's super not the boulder. So I don't know who they chose to be the like earthbending guy. It's just an interesting, like, because the other three are like big characters in the show. Paku, at least in like the first season at the end, like closer to the end, it makes sense that he's there. But like, yeah, who's the Earth guy? Do people know that? Is it me? Do I just not know the drama? I don't know. It could be just me. I could just not know. But I don't know. Tell me if you know. I think it's so interesting. What a topical show this is. Wow, it's almost like the world and our political climate are kind of reflecting the art that we create. And look at that, so many decades later. But like on a note about the show, I think it's really interesting that Katara says, like, her grandmother is the one who's telling her about times of peace beforehand. And yeah, obviously, like, we know that this is in, like, the 100-year kind of a situation where, like, Sozin's Comet first came. That's, like, indicating the 100-year war. And then that's, like, when the Avatar first disappeared. It's been 100 years. We getcha. But it's so interesting to think about that, like, in that one generation, people knew a time of peace before the Fire Nation had attacked. And Katara's grandmother is like articulating this to her, that she had a time before they were at war actively. And so to like hear people's stories about their experiences within that and have it be like a single generation that separates you and this either beautiful time in history where everything was in balance, or this horrific time in history now where everybody's at war. And I feel like that's super interesting. Also going into like with Legend of Korra, they do that as well, where like there's only like 1 degree of separation between here's all of this atrocity and the people are still even alive. Like Toph and Zuko and Katara are still alive in Legend of Korra. So it's like, it's just so topical, isn't it? That these people who have these experiences with horrible things are telling the next generation about these horrible things, and then people are still making bad choices. I don't know. It's such a beautiful and epic score on this. Is just so good. So, I mean, like, compared to some of the other intros, I think this one's an A+. Even not compared to some of the other intros, this one's an A+. I think it's just fantastic. I also really love that they have, like, 3 books. I think it's really fun that they, like, where they primarily are in the world is the book title. I also like that they made it into a book. I like that they made it literature, or like a literary reference, just to have it be book 1, book 2, book 3, as if it was something that you could like read, because it does have sort of the grandiosity. Obviously it's a kids show, which doesn't actually take away from the like gravity that the show does, and how fantastic that it does itself, but it is like in the realm of being as deep as Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. Like, it's in that, obviously Tolkien is like superiority. Like, there's nothing that's going to be ever as good as Tolkien. He spent so many decades of his life writing the Lord of the Rings and being in that world and all this stuff. Like, that was a masterwork. But like, this I think had the same attention to detail and intention of making it as grand and deep and fully fleshed out and thought-provoking and all of the things. So I think that it's like in that same vein. I just like how they set it up. I like that it's 3 books, that it's water, earth, and fire. It also is cool like that because that is literally the Avatar cycle. It's air is the one that's missed. Oh my god, also air is the one that's missed, because even in the like intro they were like saying, oh, people thought that like maybe the Avatar was never born into the air nomad society because he's been gone for 100 years, so like maybe it just like skipped and like something disrupted with the cycle. And so that's also really cool because obviously book air is not a thing in the original Avatar The Last Airbender series. Obviously it does become a thing in The Legend of Korra, that season 1 is air, but like, small tangent, I like that. I like that they did this. It's nice. Also, like, every time I'm such a sucker for like the background art and the landscapes and the like just beautiful set design, beautiful environments that they draw and make the world immersive. Like, this is beautiful, and it's just like a simple glacier like it's so simple, but it's so beautiful. Also, they do such effective storytelling. Like, this show is fantastic for storytelling and how they go about sharing the themes and the points and just just everything. This is such effective storytelling with setting up the characters. It's exposition. Yes, they're talking about how like bending is, Katara is asserting that it's not a magic system, but like for the purposes of our like the real world, so to speak, it is a magic system, so I'm gonna talk about it like that. But it's so interesting setting her up and being like a novice, and she's learning and she's trying to utilize this thing that she has access to, being waterbending, and she's trying, and then she makes a mistake, and then Sokka starts like, ugh, why is it whenever you play with magic water I get wet? And she's like, starts talking about it. And so it is exposition. It is telling us like, what is this world about? What are the rules that we're operating within? What's the suspension of disbelief that we have to like immerse ourselves into the rules of this universe? But it's done all with character driving intention and dialogue. Like Sokka being this like, oh, I'm having none of it. The sarcastic, the overconfidence, the belittling of this thing that he's not able to do, which is a whole thing later on in the series where he's like, oh, there's nothing, I don't know how to do anything. And so then he goes into swordplay and like masters that, and he's like, finds like a purpose for himself and like usefulness and that sort of thing. So, and then Katara, of course, being like she's kind of having a little bit of a fit over there, being like, it is sacred to our people. And of course, like, for her, it's sacred because it's connecting her with her mom and it's connecting her with her culture, and she wants to feel like her people aren't dying out, obviously. And then, of course, it's also like the mothering thing. Like, she caught a fish, and then Sokka was like, you ruined it, because whatever. And she's like, it's it's just really, really well storytelling in terms of articulating who the characters are, the world that we're living in, and the environment that we're operating within as well. So yeah, storytelling is just A+ in this show, and and I love it. I just think it's so good and so effective. And also, I have a psych degree and I have an acting degree, and within like learning about storytelling through the lens of like theater and acting, everything has to have a point. So every single scene that you are doing has to either drive the character or drive the plot in the world. And so like when you blend the two together, that is perfection. And I think that's what Avatar does so well, is it's character driven and it's doing the exposition in such a covert way that you don't know you're being exposited to unless you're like dissecting it like this. But it's so organic and so unintrusive, if that's the right word. Like, it's just, you're not being like info dumped on, you're being taken literally on the boat. You're floating on the storytelling river, and I think that's fantastic. Yeah. I know, like, obviously the character development is really amazing, and Sokka does get over this eventually, but the misogyny I don't know if that was like a product of its time. Probably not really a product of its time, but it's just like very like glaring and bad and obvious, and it's just really perturbing that he just has such a negative view of women, which is kind of counterintuitive to what you would like think, although I think that there's like a duality to it, because obviously like Sokka was left to be like the man of the house, and that can be dissected in a separate conversation, but he was left to be like the protector of his village and to take care of the people there. So the only like male, like his father figure and his like adult male role models are not there to sort of like teach him what that actually is or what that means, or like just basic respect for all people, rather than having like a gendered concept of like, this is what men do and this is what women do, and men are strong and this, and women are weak and they cook and blah blah blah, and like have this sort of dichotomy around it, which is just like not the case. But it's also super weird because he has such a wonderful, strong woman as his caretaker, like Gran. Like, her whole story and her whole backstory is that she left a oppressive culture that was telling her that she was less than because of her gender. And like in the Northern Water Tribe, we see that like she left Paku because he was sexist and stuff, but then I guess she marries him anyways later, or something was going on with that. I don't remember the exact details, but like there is a huge gender separation and gender norm stereotyping within the Water Tribe. It's really interesting that whatever was impressed upon Sokka and how he internalized that when he was being sort of, I guess, left behind by his adult male role models because they're off at war right now, whatever he internalized was misogyny. But then like he has such an amazing woman to teach him better than that, and even like, I don't know, like her grandmother, like their grandmother literally left the Northern Water Tribe, and that gender oppressive community and culture. But then Sokka is still still like, girls can't, I should have left you home. A girl is always gonna mess things up. And it's like, who has taught this late child, early teenager this mentality and behavior? Like, Gran did not raise that. But with all that being said, Katara immediately calls it out and calls it sexist and calls it immature and calls it like bad behavior, and she's embarrassed to be related to him. So I love that. Even though, like, I mean, sure, he's going through that character arc, and maybe that's really relatable and fantastic to have that being displayed, where you can deconstruct all of these, like, learned prejudices, regardless of what they are coming from. If you're, like, he's prejudiced, obviously, against women, but, like, going through that in terms of storytelling and depicting that, you know, you can have your mentality changed based on new information that's being presented to you, especially because they are, yeah, like, in a segregated village, like, in the middle of the South Pole. They're not around any other groups of people. Like, they're very isolated. So, of course, it's going to be like a groupthink mentality. But again, that's why I'm like, literally where? Because Gran would never raise that. And she's raising them. So how did he get this mentality if they're in, like, rural community? I don't know. But anyways, it's nice that they're calling it out and not allowing that to be, like, appropriate behavior. And he goes through the arc. But it is vexing to listen to. Yeah. I think this is also such an interesting juxtaposition, because Sokka does, like, frame himself as being this warrior, this, like, you know, I'm gonna be, like, the protector of my tribe, all that kind of stuff. But then, like, the framing of this and, like, how they're talking, and, like, Sokka is making these statements, but then literally look at Katara right now. She is literally, like, shifting water and breaking apart at least 100-year-old massive glacier just by, like, waving her arms without any direction. Like, because she obviously doesn't really know how to waterbend yet. Like, she's learning, and that's her whole, like, season 1 arc is, like, learning how to be a waterbender. So Sokka can talk whatever he wants to, but Katara is already clearly the strongest and way cooler than him. So let us continue. You know what else is really interesting in terms of the perspective of, like, the sexism and the talking down to women? Because Sokka saying that Katara's strength is weird, and then she has a stronger outburst of her magic and her power. He's labeling it as weird and then bizarre, and she's like, her power is now being treated as, like, ugh, you're, like, this is off-putting. Your strength is off-putting and weird. Like, this is crazy. That's such a metaphor for, like, now. It's such a metaphor, because things that women are strong at, or things that have strength, and, like, women representing a particular kind of strength, is always like, ugh, that's, like, it's not even that cool, or not even that important. Like, emotional strength or emotional intelligence is like, that's not important. Or, like, ugh, you're so in touch with your feeling, like, you're too emotional. Like, oh my gosh, you're so sensitive. You're able to articulate your emotions appropriately and have productive conversations about that. That's just, like, gross. And so that's exactly what he's doing here. Something that is a strength for Katara, a woman, is weird or bizarre or negative. And even the facial expressions, like, she's proud of herself. She's like, oh my gosh, look at what I just did. That's so, like, I didn't know that I had that kind of power within me. And he's looking at her like, ugh. So, like, Avatar was so ahead of its time, I tell you what. Also, I think maybe this is the perfect time, because they're introducing Zuko now. It's the perfect time to talk about how Avatar The Last Airbender is absolutely fantastic with humanizing every single character. And I think that that's so important, that even the bad guys, obviously not right now, and we get into it later, and certainly in season 2. I think that season 1 does a fantastic job at setting up the like, here's the bad guys, but then reframing it of like, not everyone is bad just because they're following this ideology. Like Zuko's famous like speech in the 3rd season is like, you know, the Fire Nation was always told that the war was our way of like sharing our greatness with the world, and the Fire Nation is great, but that was such a beautiful lie because the world hates us. We have been going in and taking over their lands and all of these different things. And so people believing the lie, it's not that they're bad people necessarily. Of course, there's going to be people who are genuinely like bad people and who are like genuinely doing things out of maliciousness, which of course is like the Fire Lord, like Ozai is, I think, the only like true bad guy. But even then, he inherited this from his father, and so it kind of goes into a generational trauma thing. But I guess you could say, like, if there was like one clear cut just bad person, then it would be Ozai. But like, I think that this show humanizes everybody so well, and it's all about like, if we stopped othering people, if we stopped saying like, oh, you're different from me and that makes you bad and that makes you like this kind of thing, then there would be such little need for conflict, because we would all be able to see the humanity and the sameness of just us being living beings in this world right now at this time, rather than trying to like have superiority and have dominance over others. Because genuinely, like, what for what? I have a lot of opinions on that, but like, oh my gosh. And then people ask like, why are you so radical? Why do you have such radical ideals? This is what we were watching as kids. Is like, it's just about humanization, and I just think that this show does the best job. Especially Azula is my favorite character. Like, I love Katara and I love Zuko. Azula is my favorite character. I think that just her psychology and how she got to where she is, especially by the end of the show, and like why she is the way that she is and what she came from, and the rhetoric that she was instilled since childhood, and just all of the components of Azula are spectacular. And there's so much to like say and dissect about Azula, because you could be like, oh, she's like a horrible villain, she's awful. Yes, that's undeniable. But we also get to see the other side of her, where she's just a broken, desperate child who wants love and acceptance and support, and to feel like she's good enough. And when you take everything out, everything away, everything else about her, with like the overconfidence and the aggression and the viciousness and all of these things, when you take everything away, she just is an insecure, desperately needing love child. She just is such an interesting character to like think about and watch and understand. And that is the beauty of the show, is that all of the characters, obviously, again, like aside from a couple that are like just bad, most of the characters in this show get to be humanized. Even Jet later on is like gonna like drown an entire village of Fire Nation settlers, and you get a humanization of like why he's doing that, why he hates them so much, why he's behaving this way. And he's not treated like a villain, he's treated with a sense of understanding, because extremism is never going to be the answer, but you can understand why somebody would think so. Because if you're dealing with extremes and mass death of so many people that you care about, and of your people, like in terms of, you know, his Earth Kingdom nationality, you know, at some point, what is the response to that? So you can understand the perspective, even if it's not right, and even if it's like morally incorrect. There's so many different like moral questions that the show provokes, and you know, like you can have empathy for every single one of these characters. The show really does such a good job at humanizing even the worst kinds of people and seeing the opposite side of that. And it, again, the Fire Nation is wrong and it is doing evil things, but the individual people within that institution of the Fire Nation, not all of them are bad or have the full scope of the truth of what's happening within the world. Yeah, even when they go to the Capitol, like, and you see the children in class when Aang goes and is, like, pretending to be a Fire Nation student in season 3, like, you see the next generation of Fire Nation people, and you get the empathy for them because they're not being taught, oh, we're going in and, you know, I've been really, like, thinking about the quote, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's been, like, my thing recently, and it's just so interesting because everyone who is acting and doing any behavior is always going to think that they're right. Now, obviously, that's not the case. Not everyone is right. Not everyone is right. But it's very interesting to think about that from perspective taking. And how do you introduce different perspectives to somebody who genuinely thinks that they're doing something right, even if they're harming other people? And how do you have those conversations where you introduce different ideas and deconstruct where the beliefs are coming from? And how do you have conversations just about people and, you know, belief systems? Because everybody's going to be really protective of their own belief systems. And, you know, when you make a belief system part of your identity, anything that challenges that is going to challenge your identity and then make you feel like you're personally being attacked, even if it's just, why do you believe that particular thing? Or, like, what made you think that particular thing? And so there's so much, there's so much, and we're not even halfway through this episode, but, like, it's so topical right now. This show is very important right now for people to watch. And how to have these conversations about morality and ideologies and perspectives. And how do we ensure that everyone has basic human rights? Because I think that that's the bare minimum that you can have a conversation about everything else. But I think that's when the, like, moral question comes in, is when things are taking away people's basic human rights. And then if that's the case, then there's a very clear indicator of who is in the wrong, at least in terms of behavior. If you want to talk about belief systems, and if you want to talk about, like, why you think a certain thing, there's a difference between, I think this, versus I'm going to actively try to be against a person being allowed to have access to basic human rights and decencies. Hot take, I guess. Obviously, other than Azula, which I just said, Iroh is my second favorite character because he's just... Who doesn't love Uncle Iroh? He's literally the best. Iroh is the ideal. You gotta have a little hobby, like you could do some knitting, you could do some embroidery. I like to read. And then you get a cup of tea, and then you're golden. And then all the world's at peace. And we can all just be happy and no problems. Have a little hobby, a little treat, and a cup of tea. Everything's grand. Be like Iroh. Listen to Iroh. I love Appa so much. He's just so precious. Well, yeah, actually, I didn't remember how much, like, setup was in this first episode. But I mean, like, obviously, you have to. There's so much, like, world setup to prep and stuff. But, yeah, wow. It's, like, so much information. But again, I think that everything is delivered really well, but it's a very slow start. It's an engaging and fun start, but it's a very slow start. That's the entire village. I don't remember if there's ever, like, an explicit conversation with, like, how insane the Southern Water Tribe numbers have dwindled. like, if we assume, which I don't know if we can assume, but if we assume that this is the entirety of the Southern Water Tribe, they're like this close to being eradicated, which is like mind blowing. And I've never thought about that really deeply before, that like if that's genuinely there's no other like villages within the South Pole, this is horrific. Yeah, wow. No, this show is absolutely fantastic with it is horrific. There's so much there's literally like war crimes and atrocities that are committed within the show, and like talking about it. And obviously the air nomads were specifically taken out in a genocide, but they like also tried to do that with the Southern Water Tribe. I don't know if they tried to do it with the Northern Water Tribe. They explain later that they couldn't get to the Northern Water Tribe because there's so much more, like, they're big city versus small town, so they had more like infrastructure and benders to support them. It's more of like a city, they have defense mechanisms, whereas like the Southern Water Tribe is much more simplistic in terms of its defenses, and it was just like hand-to-hand combat warriors and obviously the waterbenders, but they were not like prepared to go to war. Not that like anybody really was, but obviously the Southern Tribe was not, and then of course the Airmads were not, because they're specifically a pacifist group of people. That's part of their culture. But that's actually crazy that the Fire Nation attempted to eradicate the Water Tribe individuals, and basically they did eradicate all of the air nomads. And I feel like there is something to be said about the fact that Aang like had run away and did survive, because I don't know if he would have survived if he had have been in one of the air temples at the time of the Fire Nation going in and invading them. So fate and storytelling all kind of worked out in his favor, that he is there now 100 years later to save the world. Obviously, because that's the story that was written and is being told now, but it's just something really intense to think about, that like just by happenstance one person was able to survive, but otherwise it is likely that it would have been an entire eradication of that group of people. And this show is very heavy, which is why it's so fantastic and so important that they managed to balance so much humor and so much like fun, lighthearted energy, as well as having it be very serious, very real, and very grounded in these intense concepts, but they make it so digestible and so understandable for the audience that was meant for, and that it stayed with us. Clearly, like, it stayed with me however many, like, I guess decades later at this point. I don't remember when this came out, but it's got to be at least 20 years that this is, like, you know? So yeah, timeless, beautiful story, super important, very, very important, especially now. It's such a beautiful juxtaposition that they were just like penguin sledding. Like the two of them were completely like playing, talking about like, oh, I haven't done this since I was a kid, and like Aang's like, you are still a kid, girl, like, come on. And then they come out, and then this is like the first introduction for Aang, at least, of the gravity and the severity of the world is at war right now. This is their version of like world war. It's a global experience for them. Everyone is being affected in one way or another. And it's to have that innocence and that observation of, here's these children who are just trying to enjoy their lives and get to have that innocence. And then here's the horrific like reminder of what's going on and why the world is in this horrible state the way that it is. And again, it's just like, it's a beautiful representation of the visual storytelling, going from like joy and light, and even the color grading that they did. This is so dark and looming, and it's backlit, and so it like looks very jagged and, you know, all this stuff, whereas like before when they were playing, it's all very rounded snow caps, whereas this is like ice and sharp and dangerous. And so like, yeah, it's just beautiful storytelling in all of the components that they're utilizing. Yeah. Avatar is a fantastic show. And that was the first episode of Avatar The Last Airbender. Yeah. So, Avatar The Last Airbender absolutely still holds up. I think, talking about it just in terms of this first episode, because of course we're just, if one was to only watch the first episode and had not seen the rest of the series already, I think it still holds up really well. Yeah, it's a little bit slower in terms of what's going on. It certainly is it starts off with a lighter sort of kids show energy, but that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what the point was. I think that the visual storytelling, the dialogue, the interactions with the characters, you get so much from so much that they have to pack in to the first episode to set up the world state and the conflict and all of these big things that they have to get you ready to be in the world for, with it, the war and where the water tribe is at right now, with where their people are and all of these different things. So there's so much to set up, but I think that it just does it in such a beautiful and effective way. So it's really fantastic as a standalone episode, even though it is on the lighter note, and it's definitely oriented as a kid's show if you're just looking at the one episode. However, Avatar The Last Airbender as a series is an 100 out of 10. I think that it still holds up as one of the greatest animated shows of all time because of just how fantastic it is. The storytelling, again, is fantastic. The animation is still beautiful. I think it still holds up. It's very stylistic and stunning and very distinct. Every culture within this world is very distinctly that culture, and I think that it's just beautiful. It's so well done, and yeah, I think it's pretty close to perfect. I think my only gripes with it as a whole is the humor is very young, and so there are stuff the snot jokes with Aang and Appa sneezing, and then Sokka gets snot on his person, but that's just where the kids' humor comes from. It was a kid's show, it still is a kid's show, but it is so perfect. I don't think it's nostalgia. I think that I think this holds up because of what it is and what it did with what it had. So, yeah, fantastic. If you haven't watched it, do. Rewatch it. It's such a fun time. And also, again, it's very, very topical and poignant right now, so maybe some of the messages might be a nice refresher for all of us in the world at this time. This was super fun. I really enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments which Avatar bending style you would most like to have. I think I was pretty on the nose with my attire today. I got a firebending little necklace here. I love firebending style. I love the element of fire, and so I would 100% want to be a firebender. Obviously, I do not agree with the Fire Nation as a construct, but I do love firebending, so I would want to be a firebender. But yeah, let me know what bending style is your favorite and what episode is your favorite. I really love the Ember Island Beach episode because it's the Ember Island Players episode is just so fun. And it's such a fun little recap episode. I don't know if that's actually my favorite, but it's one that I think about. It's kind of the equivalent of the Buffy musical episode. It's just a fun one, and I really enjoy it. So I really like that. Also, though, I really like the Southern Raiders. Katara's revenge quest is fantastic. Such a fantastic episode. Oh, and the beach episode when they're all talking about their childhood trauma. So there's a lot. Watch this show is so good. It's so good. It's just fantastic. So yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, consider giving a like and subscribing to continue joining us on all of our adventures. But with that, thank you all so much for watching. Everything with love, and we'll see you next time in the treasure trove. Bye.